Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast. I'm Steve Altishan, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today I'm here with co-parenting coach Leslie Holthoff Martin to discuss how to expect the unexpected co-parenting hurdles and pitfalls, and how you can anticipate and address them before they become a problem. Well, that was a mouthful. In the middle, it reminded me of Carly Simon's Anticipation song, and I almost started singing it, but nobody would want that to happen. So before we start, Leslie, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a divorce and co-parenting coach. I have been doing some version of co-parenting for almost 30 years. I'm finishing up my dissertation, which I'm writing on joint shared custody. So I study the 50-50 world. Which is what I did with my kids for a while. But like I said, I tried all the other stuff before. I've been a little bit obsessed with co-parenting because when I was going through divorce and becoming a co-parent, I didn't know anybody who was doing it other than, dad gets the kids every other weekend. And so I felt I had a lot to learn. My parents would have celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary last week. So they were married for 45 years before he passed away. And so I only knew what it was like to raise kids in a, traditional family type setting. So I've sort of dedicated my career to figuring out the best way to manage co-parenting and how to actually find some benefits and really help your kids thrive in that environment.
I love that. I love that. We probably get this issue as the most problematic experience of our clients, once the divorce is over. It's one blames the other, one doesn't blame. It's just there's very little, and we talked about this, communication between them, and there's very little sort of understanding what happens when the kids get older. And we talked about that, and I'm glad you're here because I think those issues really are important. So I'm going to start with sort of the obvious question. Co-parenting does need to change as your child ages, doesn't it?
Of course it does. And I think that's one of the hardest things for people to grasp, especially in the beginning when they're coming up with this parenting plan, right? We get stuck on, the big Christmas morning, or this summer or that summer, or, everything feels so final. You're right. And you're like, oh, my kid is 7 and this is what we're going to be doing for the next 10 or 11 years. And no, the parenting plans are created to be a bit fluid. There's certainly a basis for getting started, but, your kids need different parts of you as they grow older. Obviously, a newborn is going to have some reliance on their mother that they may need their father more when they're 17. I mean, that analogy is obvious, but when you're in the middle of it, and it's happening, it doesn't feel so obvious, especially when those changes are smaller. Your child who's at home, the needs change when they start kindergarten and then when they go to high school. And it's just, as a child, they're supposed to be lucky to have two parents that want to be a part of that. And as parents, we should be able to look at it that way and say, you know what, this is fantastic. I'm sort of at wit's end, but thank God I've got this other parent that I can call and say, tag, you're it, right? Yep. And we have to learn that is not a failure. Saying I need your help, other parent, does not mean that I have failed as a parent in any way. It actually means I'm stronger as a parent because I'm bringing in the other half and I'm saying together, we can do better. And I think sometimes as single parents, it feels like failure. I had to do it myself. And I know that it was the first time I had to call and say, I'm at wit's end, my son is driving me crazy. I've done the discipline that I think I should do, and I've said the right things I think I should say, and it's just not getting through to him. It felt like I must be a terrible mom, right? And I was happily surprised with the way that he handled it, and it was a big challenge for me. He was 15, son's at 15, they are what they are, and anyway, it ended up being a real blessing in disguise. And so I really encourage parents to be thankful that there are two of you in this co-parenting journey, and to remember that that's what the other parent is there for. Even if it's not written in black and white in the parenting plan, that's what they're there for. You're there as a parent to, sort of make those decisions as they come, because parenting is unpredictable.
I love that, because so many people think of the parenting plan as the end all be all. And it's not. It's a statement of legal rights and responsibilities. And like you said, co-parenting goes way beyond that. And it's all these other things kind of happen. But if I do come into you, and maybe at the beginning, and I say, we're supposed to write a co-parenting plan, what would you start to talk about? I mean, what do you think you should at least need to put, or maybe even more than at least, in a co-parenting plan right off, right? Even if the children are 2 years old.
One thing that we do as coaches is we try to, a lot of times, your first parenting, when you think of that, right? When you think of this is what I want and this is what I want to allow the other parent to have, or however you look at it, it's easy to, so many parents go, I want him full time. He cheated on me, or I'm mad at him, or I want the kids full time. And one thing we do as a coach is we go, okay, I want you to walk me through that. Walk me through a Wednesday when you have a huge, you have to travel for work, or you have a huge presentation, and, life is going to happen on your end too. And then a lot of times when you really walk through what the day-to-day looks like of full-time parenting, you can kind of come to the realization and say, you know what, this isn't what's best for anybody. Not only does it not allow me to be the best parent because you never get a break, but it really takes away from the other parent, and they don't get any chance to be a parent. It's not good for your kids. It's definitely not the best thing. And certainly when you jump at it out of spite, right? There are, of course, parenting situations, domestic violence and things like that, where that's not possible. We're not talking about that. But in general, co-parenting terms, I try to really walk my clients through the day-to-day and say, when are you at your best parenting? What are you really good at? What is the other parent really good at? And talk about those things, because you do have different gifts. That's the beauty of it. And again, those things change. It may be that your job is great for taking your child to and from the elementary school, which is in your neighborhood. But when they go to, middle school, it's further away. They're going to start having sports after school. They're going to, these types of things. Lean on the other parent. That's what you're supposed to do.
I know that a lot of parents also get hung up on this custody, which is a term of art, actually, and making decisions about the kid. And how that not only can be shared, but how that can change over time, because it seems to me that the decision to, let's say, buy a computer, or the decision to sign up for this class, that's something that can be discussed between parents.
Oh my gosh, yes. And there's so many things. I know one that popped up for me that I wasn't expecting was video games. What video games can my 8-year-old son play, and how do those, ratings, do they matter? And, kind of, that's the new rated R movie, right? Is like these video games. And that was something that obviously we had never thought to put into a parenting plan, but it was something that I felt really strongly about. And that was, I don't want my 8-year-old son playing these video games that are meant for adults to play with assault rifles. And, I don't even want to know what's in them, to be honest. And so for my husband and I, many years ago, ex-husband, that was a challenge that we had. And that goes to my other co-parenting point, is pick your battles. That was really important to me. And there were things that I let go because it wasn't worth fighting about. To me, that was. And I said, look, in this particular sense, in this particular case, you really almost have to look at which parent is being a little bit more conservative, right? So what damage is going to be done if we don't let him play this video game at 8 years old versus what damage is being done if we do? And it's, we don't know, right? We don't know the damage that could happen if he's 8 and he's playing these games. And of course they're doing studies and all these things. But the truth is, this is even 10, 15 years ago, right? We really had no idea. And so I just felt like it's true, I was being more conservative on the topic, but I was like, we don't know what the outcome will be, but I'm saying this is important to me. And I'm going to say, if we need to revisit our parenting plan, if we need to talk to lawyers again, that's the route we'll take. I feel very strongly about this. BB guns, I lost that war. That one, I was like, okay, well, if you're with him and, you feel comfortable doing it, I don't love that he has a BB gun, but I had to get over that. That was one that I let go. So picking your battles, I think, is really important when it comes to co-parenting. And it's not only okay, but it's expected that you parent in different ways. You have different parenting styles. And it's okay that the things that are okay at my house and the things okay at your house are different, as long as they're within, some certain agreed upon boundaries. I might make the kids come home and do homework the second they get off the bus. Maybe you eat dinner first and then you do the homework. As long as your kid is adapting okay to that, that's one of those little things where you just let it go. Your kids are better at adapting to things like that than you think. But you just really have to decide what's worth fighting about.
Yeah. How about anticipating the future? Do you try to emphasize that, or is it more about the process of being flexible and how to change when the times arise? Because I know there are some parenting plans that will say, in kindergarten this happens, in high school this happened, at college this happens, and others that are more like, here's how you agree to stuff and how you don't agree to stuff.
As a general life practice, I try not to look too far ahead, especially in parenting plans. I just think anything more than 2 or 3 years, you don't even know who your kids are going to be, right?
Yep.
There's so many things that change so quickly. Kids can change every 6 months, and obviously that slows down a little bit, but it's just 1 month can be totally different than the next. And it's very hard to decide how your middle schooler should be, treated as a high schooler. And then of course, just to me, it's impossible. I find it wasteful to, try to plan the future that far in advance. So I really encourage people to be in the here and now. What does our child need right now? And obviously you can anticipate the next school year. That far advanced, yes, it's good to try to anticipate some issues that come up, but not much further than that, in my opinion.
I love that. And that requires, I guess, the second part of what you and I were talking about is so important. And a lot of time there is lacking, and that's effective communication between the co-parents. If it isn't written, they have to figure out how to do it somehow.
Yes, right. And communication, we make it sound so easy, right? Like just this one word, make it all so good. Yeah. But communication is the hardest thing to do, because you don't want to, it's very hard to separate your ex from your co-parent. And I've even suggested sometimes almost give them a nickname in your head, right? So dad is this guy and my ex is this guy. And so that I can almost, in my mind, I can say, I'm not mad at dad, right? I'm mad at X. And you have to really, sometimes that helps. Sometimes it doesn't, but for me, it did. And I had to say, look, this is important and this isn't. And no matter how bad you don't want to talk to your ex, it's necessary to talk to your other co-parent. And so something else we do as a coach with my co-parenting clients is try to learn how to communicate. If you're talking about who's going to pick up little Billy from soccer on Thursday, not the time to sneak in the text and say, P.S. I saw you with your new girlfriend at Food Line yesterday, right? Like, not the time. You have to separate the two. And you have to be willing to have these well-needed conversations about the kids while leaving out any of the emotional relationship baggage that still lingers. It's so important.
I love that. It's like co-parenting is almost a business plan.
It is, and my clients hate to hear it, but I always say this. I'm like, it's never going to fail that you're going to need something from the other parent. It can be something as awful as your grandfather died and you want your child to go to the funeral, right? But it's not your weekend or it's not your day. You're going to need favors, and they are too. So you need to always sort of approach it. How would I want to be treated? The golden rule. How would I want to be treated if I was in the same situation? And to kind of always look at it like that. And I say, I know it's going to break you, but try really hard in each of your big communications to give a compliment. Like, thank you for grabbing Billy from soccer practice the other day. Work was crazy and I really appreciated the help. Like, when those things happen, try really hard to give some acknowledgement and to really appreciate what they did. It can be small. I know you have to start small, but it really does make a difference too.
Mm-hmm. I love the thing about being something complimentary, something positive, because it feels like the negative is the first thing people turn to when talking to each other, and how can you get rid of that? I mean, how do you get past that negative? I just love your ideas. What about, I guess I would call it, using the children? And a lot of people, I don't think there's a problem with it, but it's like, okay, tell dad this.
Oh, tell dad this, or what, this one is huge. Tell me what you guys did this weekend. And not like what was your favorite part of the weekend? Or, you can have conversations with your kids, but if you're asking, where did you go to dinner? What time did you get home from dinner? Did you go to bed on time? How late did you sleep in? Or what did you eat for breakfast? That is bad. That is using the kids in the same way as, asking them about child support. Like, it is just a huge no-no all across the board, but it is sometimes hard to recognize. And I've found that some of my clients who think they know not to do that, they still do that in ways that they didn't even realize they were doing it. And what you just said is, hand this to your dad for me. Like, no. One of the things in my co-parenting research that I found fascinating is that essentially when you talk bad about the other parent to the child internalizes it as if you were saying it about them. So when you say, your dad is fill in the blank, or your mom is fill in the blank, or whatever, if it's something negative, they take it that you mean that about them.
Yep.
And I think if more parents understood the damage that because I don't know that that if you don't really understand psychology, or, it's just not something a lot of people think about, but, it's so important. Don't say something to your child about their other parent that you wouldn't say to them about them,
Yeah.
like, it's just, just don't do it. And that kind of aligns too with, be careful what you ask them. It's okay if you don't know every single thing they did last weekend. And if you need to get something there, to the other parent, there are other ways, as much as you can leave the child out of that part, the better off your child will be. They don't need any more to carry.
Yeah. I imagine, hey, Jimmy, who's your dad saying this week is probably not a good thing to talk about.
All right. The worst, right? And yet,
Always.
happens all the time. But in that regard, I think also when you're co-parenting, it's really important to give the other parent the heads up. Hey, I started seeing somebody. You don't have to say, I need to introduce you right now. Or sometimes that's obviously been addressed in a parenting plan, but hey, I just want to let you know that you might hear around town that I'm seeing somebody else. Or, I have had co-parents where they moved someone new in the house and didn't tell the other co-parent. Obviously, do not do that. Do not announce on Facebook that you're having a child with your new relationship. You have to tell the other parent. You want to make sure that your child is going to get the support they need when they find out about these things. And how could you possibly think that the other parent should find out from the child? Like, that's awful. So,
mentioning that made me think also communication, obviously between the co-parents, and as you're talking between the children and the parents, but there's other people that communication is important, I think, to help co-parenting. I mean, they're communicating with the teachers, they're communicating potentially with the step parent or the to-be step parent or the cousins of the ex. I mean, it seems like the communication line can go sideways in a lot of different places.
It can. And I think that it sneaks up on you too. Like you just said, sometimes I don't even think you realize, especially in small communities, you are talking to other people's families, or maybe your ex is still friends with your cousins, and these types of things happen. And yeah, communication really does make so much of it easier, even though it feels harder at first.
If I were to come to you and say, how do I communicate with my ex?
Okay,
how,
so
they always miss this thing. I've told them that this thing is happening, or they never tell me this thing is happening. Do you have some recommendations you tend to give people about maybe the best way to communicate and maybe the worst way to communicate?
I do think the best way to communicate is email or text over writing, but I always suggest you learn how to do drafts. Write the first one. Do not put the to address in if you're doing an email. if you listen to nothing else I say, trust me on that. But, write whatever you want. Don't worry about what it sounds like. Don't worry about somebody else reading it, and get it all out. And then take from that, okay, how much of this is really about the issue at hand? And then pick that out and try to take that out and leave that emotion. And you will feel better for having gotten the anger out, and the frustration. You will feel better for having just typed it or wrote it or however you do it. But, like I said, don't send that. And then make sure that when you are communicating via written word, do the thing your teachers told you in elementary school, read it over, make sure that you're not allowing that anger or the emotions that you feel to get into that, and just try to be very clear, very concise. A compliment doesn't hurt. And be clear about what you want too. A lot of times my clients have communication issues and I'm like, well, what are you trying to get? Oh, well, I want to trade the weekend in May for the weekend in August. And I'm like, but you didn't even say that. You know what I mean? You're sort of fighting about switching times, but you never even said when you were looking for and why. Like, it's okay to say my sister's getting married in August and it's not my weekend, but I'd really like for the kids to be there. Like, that's something that makes it, it's just communicating, not I want this weekend. I don't need to tell you why. You don't need to know what I'm doing. Like, stop. Like, it's okay to talk about these things, like you would a friend.
Yeah. I'm going to hit a pet peeve of mine after a minute.
Okay.
It is not being specific in the communications when you're actually trying to get something understood and done. And, hey, I got this thing and that, and I got that. And what do you think about that? And then maybe something here. And then you get a thumbs up emoji. And it's like, what?
Yes. And another point is, if you're not too much at once, right? Like, sometimes you'll get a text message with like 4 questions and then they get back an answer with like 1 of the 3 questions. And I'm like, okay, let's kind of break this down. Let's address one issue at a time, and which of these is the most important. We don't want to be overwhelming. I mean, you are still typically having many of these conversations in the middle of the day, often where your co-parent is at work or your co-parent has other kids, or, you have to remember and stop taking it personal, like, they haven't responded to me in 2 hours. Well, you don't really know what they have going on. You have to think about it like that too. But anyways, I would say just limit it. One conversation, one text, one email at a time. And not so that the other person doesn't feel overwhelmed with all these questions and really get lost in it. And you don't get what you want.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I would give that to my son today.
Yes. That's just a great overall any relationship in general.
Yes.
Bit of advice it is.
What I just want to hit a little, just for a little, because this again becomes a co-parenting nightmare at times, is just call it money, paying for things. I mean, there is a general legal rule of what child support is, what spouse support is, and what they're supposed to go to. But there's a myriad of stuff that comes up, and I think we may have talked about this. It's my kid turns 16. All right, who's going to pay for the car insurance? Who's going to buy the car?
I told you my biggest fight that I had with my ex-husband was about when my son started driving and car insurance. And of course, it would have been futile to have that conversation when we got divorced and he was 2.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it was upon us, and that stuff. Yeah, hard decisions they are. And that was something that I didn't even know where to begin. Because you have, it's more than that, right? It's never just the car insurance, it's the car. It's where the car is going to stay. It's who's going to pay every time the car has a repair.
Who's going to be in the car?
Oh my gosh. I mean, is it my car? Is he allowed to drive it to your house? I mean, those are real co-parenting arguments. Like, I'm going to buy my kid this car and he's not allowed to drive it to his mom's house. This is real conversations that I have to say, what about that makes you feel good? What about that makes your child feel good? How are you being a good co-parent in that situation? Your job as a parent should be to make the fact that your child has 2 homes and 2 parents that don't live together as seamless for them as possible. You can't make it perfect. Not that married couples have perfect parenting either, but you can never really get there. So it's sort of just, how can we make this the easiest on him? And as discussed before, you want to have those conversations not in front of him. You want to have those conversations privately between the two of you, until you decide what happens. And then you have a united front in talking to your child about what the rules will be, for such a huge responsibility. And at that point, you can talk about, okay, when you turn 18, this car will become yours, or whatever the case may be. When you turn 18, you will take over your own insurance, or however you come up with it. But, when they reach that 16 and driving becomes a thing, you can really start laying out for them what that will look like in the near future.
Oh, I like that. Communication. I just want to hit one last part of communication, and you touched on it.
Okay.
You said email, text. Those are your kind of favorites.
They are.
What about social media?
Oof. So my suggestion to my divorce clients is you have to stop being friends on social media, at least for a while. I'm like, take a break. It might be a year, maybe longer. That depends on your relationship, but you're both better off not being in the know of everywhere they are and everywhere they go. And it doesn't mean that, and this is all breakups. Okay. Like that is my advice to my 20-year-old child when him and his girlfriend break up. I'm like, take a social media break. Later, I encourage you to be friends. I think that you played an important part in each other's lives, but you have to take a break, cut it out. Do not communicate over social media. Do not even look at each other's social media until you are well into what you consider high functioning co-parenting, where you can be excited to see a picture of your child with your ex and potentially a new person. Until that would make you happy, don't do it. Nothing good can come from it.
I like that. I like that. We are almost at the end. Hard to believe. Hard to believe. I want to do two things. I want to first let everybody know who's listening now and in the future. We get a lot of future Facebook Lives. And let people know how they can get a hold of you, and just give them some ways to find you, because your stuff, what I like about your stuff is very nuts and bolts. It's not pie in the sky stuff. This is kind of nuts and bolts stuff, which I really like it.
Thank you. My website is Leslie Hope Coaching. I'm on Leslie Hope Holthoff, Facebook, Instagram. You can find me there. I also wrote a book called Not Mary, Not Row, The Survival Story of a Reluctant Teen Mom. And that is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, anywhere you want to look. And also on my website is the links to, obviously, contact me, email me, find the link to my book, find me on social media. Anything you need can be found there. Leslie Hope Coaching.
I love it. I love it. And right before we say goodbye, you had mentioned don't be afraid of tough conversations. You're going to have tough conversations. And that kind of led to, my kind of thinking, you tell me, is don't be afraid of co-parenting. I mean,
I love co-parenting. I went into it terrified and thinking, what am I doing to my kids? What am I doing to me? And I ended up walking away from it. And sometimes I think, man, I think I figured this out so much better than other people. There's something to be said for being able to pick up the phone and get a break when you need it. There's just something to be said for, there are benefits to co-parenting. I don't like it when people look at co-parenting and they're like, this sucks and we're going to make the best of a terrible situation. That's not what co-parenting is.
Right.
Co-parenting is an equally important way to parent. It is equal to quote unquote traditional parenting. And your kids can end up equally as well-rounded and intelligent and smart and feel loved. You just have to be committed to get them there. And you have to believe that that's possible, obviously.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, we have definitely run out of time. So Leslie, I really, really appreciate you being here
so
today.
Much. I love talking about co-parenting, so I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, and I appreciate you being here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone else, thank you for joining us. And if anyone has any further questions about today's topic, you can post it here. You can get a hold of Leslie, or if you happen to send something to us, we can get you connected with Leslie. So until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and be well.